Hey everybody, Crazy Canuck here. Welcome to Course Design 101. We are on episode 6 now. Today we are going to look at a few more visual kind of extra things that you might want to put on your golf course. So I want to look at cart paths, I want to look at walls, fences, and a little bit on bridges. So today we're going to learn how to lay down a basic cart path, a basic fence. I'll get a little bit into retaining walls. Word of warning, I am terrible at retaining walls. I'm not that great. I'm going to show you how some ideas of how people do it. But yeah, just a word of warning. I'm not great at retaining walls, but I'll give you a place to get started. Okay, and I'll show you some bridges. So let's start with the cart path. So I'm going to go to Create Add. I'm going to head over to Surfaces. And you have the option of selecting up to 3 alternate surfaces for your golf course. So in addition to rough, heavy, rough fairway, you can have things like mulch, pine straw, and some different surfaces like cart paths. So you can choose up to 3 surfaces. Just because this has a path, you don't have to make this the cart path. Surface 1 could be the cart path if you want. It doesn't matter, but just so the icons match up and it's easy for me to remember in case I'm adding extra layers or extra surfaces. I always make the cart path surface number 3. So I'm going to hit Y, and then I have a selection of different things I can use. So I can have cart path, I can have some mulch, pine straw, a whole bunch of cart path options. So just pick one you like. I'll just go something like this. So once I've selected my texture, I'm going to select it. And again, you're going to get the same menu as you got with laying down rough and fairway and stuff like that. Path width, I kind of like my cart paths to be a little bit narrower. So I get those down to all the way to the minimum amount, 1.7 meters. And now I'm going to spline it out. So it's always best to come up with a plan first before you spline it. So I'm going to kind of have it curve around here. I'd like to curve it around this water. So you know what? I'm going to get rid of a little bit of this lake so we can use our cart path there. There we go, we can sneak a cart path through there. And then it's maybe going to go up the hill and kind of finish over here. All right. So this part of design, honestly, is probably the most tedious part. I don't put a lot of cart paths, walls, fences on my golf course, just because I find it really tedious and boring to do. If you take your time and do it right, it can really add some pop to your golf course, but if you don't want to put in the time, I would just avoid it because it's going to actually hurt your golf course probably more than it helps it in terms of visuals. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, so once I've splined it, I'm going to hit B, and now I have this rather messy looking sharp edged cart path. So let's fix it a little bit. So just select a spline point somewhere, hit edit. This menu should look familiar by now. I'm going to smooth the path out, and that helps it a little bit. But again, we need to flatten this cart path out because it's, you know, really sideways and things like that. So let's smooth it out. In order to do this, we're going to select our favorite brush, and we're going to make it relatively small, and we're just going to move along and flatten it. Now, I do not suggest doing click and drag. No, that's shorter, but you don't get as good results with that. So I just go a little bit at a time. Now, what I have actually noticed, maybe of the few things, there's not many reasons why this designer is worse than the one in TGC 2019, but cart paths has taken actually quite a big step back. These, I cannot for the life of me figure out how to get these straight. It was an issue in 2019, they weren't very straight, but I mean, this is really bad. Almost to the point where I don't even know if I'm going to bother putting cart paths on any of my courses. I mean, they're okay from a long distance away, like you don't really notice it, but close up, oof. I hope they fix that, because that's actually a pretty big step back, in my opinion. Okay, so now we're going to kind of go up the hill, and this is where I kind of make things a little bit closer, because I just want this cart path to go up gradually. Just making very little tiny changes. As we weave our way up the hill. Yeah, I'm gonna have to play with cart paths a little bit more. This is actually the first time I've played with them in the new designer, but I have heard people make a few complaints that the splines are really messy and not straight, and I can see that now. So, just something to keep in mind. Right, so we're getting to the end of our path here. But yeah, I mean, it's a nice little visual if that's something you want to do. But for me, honestly, I don't put. There's very few courses where I've thrown cart paths on them. All right, so there we go. That's a bit better. And now we've got our nice little cart path. Okay, so again, that's just, you just spline it and then you flatten it the best you can. But yeah, again, these splines are quite crooked. But yeah, you can change the point. So if I want this part a little bit straighter, I can move it to make it a little bit straighter. I would have to probably reflatten it because I only flattened some points, but yeah, you can do all that. Okay. Next, let's talk about something like a fence. So maybe if I wanted to put a fence along the edge. Okay, so what I would do first with fences, another rather finicky part of the designer. Okay, so I'm just gonna flatten a part out here. I'm just gonna make a sample fence. I don't know why I would put a fence here, but just for practice. Just gonna get rid of these objects. Bye-bye. All right, so to find your fences, you're gonna go to Create Add. You're gonna go to Place Objects, and you have Walls and Fences. So you have a whole bunch to pick from. We'll get to retaining walls later because they're a special beast altogether. You can also put down steps and things like that. So let's just go with a classic, kind of like a white pickety fence. So you have some options of things you can lay down. So you've got some fence posts of different sizes, and then you've got some fence options too. All right, so if you're building a fence that is kind of slightly elevated, like this one's going to be slightly on a hill, start from the bottom. Don't start from the top, otherwise you're going to have some issues. Okay, so start from the bottom best you can. So the nice thing about this is when you select a fence, is once you've laid down a point, you can actually snap the pieces together, which saves a lot of time. So you can raise, lower, okay, you can rotate it, whatever you want. So it's always easy if you want a straighter fence. I always like to get really top down and try to get it as straight as I can. But yeah, I'm just showing you guys how it works here, so it's not going to be a great fence. So I'm just going to select my one and lay down my first fence, and then another fence path will show up. And now I can choose to either snap it to the object that is the closest, in that case, which is the other fence post, or I could snap it to the location. It literally does the same, basically the same thing. So I can do that. Maybe I can add a little turn to it. Boom. Same thing. Boom. Now, do you see how it's turned yellow? That's starting to mean, okay, part of it's starting to sneak underground. So I might need to raise that up a bit. Okay, so if you're making the elevated fences, you're gonna have to do this. Oh yeah, it's a little bit higher and it's obviously not even, but if you want fences to kind of go up hills, this is what you're gonna have to do. Again, I would just raise that up. And that's really how you lay a basic fence down. It's simple as that. Okay. And again, lots of different options you can use. And then if you want, maybe you don't want that to be elevated, you can just go into your sculpt land and you can flatten the land a bit more if you want. Okay, but then you have to go back and readjust the wall, the heights of the fences. So really up to you and what you want to do. All right, so there's our fence. Okay, something I've avoided, I never actually talked about in my Course Design 101 series for TGC 2019, just because I'm awful at them, but a lot of people want to know how retaining walls work. Retaining walls are a giant pain in the butt. They're actually, from what I've seen, better than they were in the old game in terms of how they work. But they're a little weird in how they work, and to get them to look really good is very difficult. There's a few designers that have really nailed the look of retaining walls. But for me, just based on the amount of time it takes to make a good retaining wall with like curves and all that stuff, for me, it's just not worth the time. But that's just me. Okay, so I'm just gonna build like a little sample lake. I'm just gonna go down to the water table. Let's just build a little lake here. Okay, and we'll say, okay, let's say we want retaining walls around it. I wouldn't put a retaining wall around this lake because, well, it's pretty flat to the ground. So it's not, we don't really have anything to retain. So let's say we want to build one kind of around this little lake area here. So what I would always start off by doing is I want to kind of create, like, this shoreline is just all over the place. For a retaining wall, the shoreline should be pretty straight or a nice little curve, so it's nicely rounded. So what shape I use for the sculpting is I use the really sharp brushes. So they're actually over here. It's the circle and the square here. So what I would do is if I want to make a really sharp edge, I would just kind of line up my edge here. And then I'm just going to drop it down. Okay? I'm going to drop it down as far as I possibly can, just to get a really sharp edge. Okay? Now the weird thing I've noted, it doesn't create a perfectly straight, flat edge, but that's about as good as we can get for now. I haven't figured out how to get it any better than that. So let's actually look at how the retaining wall works, because it's kind of funny how it works. I'm going to select retaining wall, and there's different sizes of retaining wall pieces. You can have corners, smaller areas. Okay, so you can do all that in order if you want to build corners and things like that. All right, I think I've built this edge a little bit too high. Let's just build it over here. Okay, let's flatten this out a bit first. Oh. Doesn't matter what you use, but it's gonna flatten the edge of my retaining wall out best I possibly can. But after this, I'm actually gonna have to go back and actually I don't really have to fix the edges too much. Okay. So once I've got kind of a relatively flat edge here, I'm gonna take my heavy rough and I'm gonna try to just cover as much of the edge as I possibly can. Just like that, so it's as green as I can. Now, back to the retaining wall. Where is it? There it is. Walls, fences, here's my retaining wall here. So you have some posts. Some people were asking for, like, how do you put bulkheads down? Those are your bulkheads there. Okay, so maybe I'd have a nice little bulkhead on the corner here. Down like that. Okay, but how the retaining wall piece works, it looks like this. Okay, so it's a retaining wall, and then it's got this weird little piece here. And this piece will match the texture that is directly below it. So right now, below here would just be dirt, like the bottom of the lake. And as you can see, once I move it over over here, it turns green. See that? It turns green. Okay. So we want a nice, clean edge as best we can. And this is probably where the biggest issue is people lay down retaining walls, and it's really hard to get right on the surface. And also you kind of still get this ugly little brown junk. So we want to try to get rid of that. So the best way to do it, and the best way people do it, is that once they lay down their retaining walls, okay, and you can snap it just like you did with the other things. Okay, if you want to build little corners, I suggest using the smaller pieces and then just turn them just slightly. So just line them up and turn them. Now it looks, this is again super finicky and I'm terrible at it. But yeah, you can make little corners like that. So yes, you have this, but it's really hard to line the edge, just the way the sculpt tool works. It's really hard to get the land to line up flush with the retaining wall. So the only real workaround, there we go, is to actually double and triple up your retaining walls. So just add another layer of retaining wall. Like that. And I might even do another layer because I want to hide as much of that grossness as I can. I might even go 4. Okay, some people have different workarounds for this. And then I would have to do that all the way down my retaining wall. But that would give me a lot cleaner edge because you can see the rough goes right up to it. Then I would just kind of flatten with my brush to get this as flush as I possibly can. Probably use my sharper brush here. Yeah, it's... I don't know. I'm not a big retaining wall fan. Never have been. So there we go. You can get you can get it pretty flush, but it takes a lot of tweaking to get right. But anyway, that is kind of how to do a retaining wall. Okay. Very, very tedious. Takes a long time, but if you're willing to put in the effort, you can get some nice looks for sure. Last thing I want to look at is bridges, and bridges work pretty much the same way as walls and fences and all that did. Let's say for some odd reason it would be kind of silly to do it, but I wanted to put a bridge across this lake. Look kind of silly because there's a cart path here we can get around it, but just because there's a body of water, we'll do it here. Yeah. So again, place objects, and we have bridges down here. Now you have 2 different types of bridges. You can have standalone bridges. These are mostly like kind of one-piece bridges, but you can put these together if you want to. I mean, there's a lot of nice ones to choose from. Okay. And you can also have sectional bridges. These are smaller ones where you're just adding pieces to. I prefer to use the sectional ones, but I've chained together the standalone ones too. I'm going to show you how to make kind of a straight bridge, and then I'll show you how to make a bridge with kind of a little bit of a curve in it. So let's say I wanted to create a bridge like this one here. And I just wanted it to go across to the other side. So what I would do is, this looks like the end piece. So I would line it up so it's right on the edge as best as I possibly can. Again, you can sculpt to line it up perfectly. But there it is. And then all I'm going to do, select my other bridge piece here, is I just snap it to the object and just connect it. Easy as that. Really easy. And kind of line it up there. See how it's kind of down below there? I want to fix that. So again, I would maybe just use my fuzzy brush and just pour it down. A little bit more. This one's a little tricky to work with because the water level is like right there, but yeah, there's a little edge there. There we go. Pretty good. Okay, so you can just make a straight little bridge like that. Or if you wanted to add like a little curve to it, I kind of like adding little curved bridges. Last thing I'm going to show you today. Let's use the same one. So let's say I kind of want to curve it this way. So again, I will choose where I want to start my bridge. We'll start it kind of right here. Again, I would have to go back and probably fix that because it's not really that flush. Actually, let's just do that right now. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to continue adding the bridges. Oh, there was an alert there. Someone's followed me on Twitch, so I apologize for that. I haven't figured out how to get rid of the sound. That's my Twitch alert that's gone off. All right, so place objects, bridges, sectional. Oh, that's the bridge there. All right, so I'm gonna raise it up, and then I'm just gonna snap it. But if I want to add a little turn, here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to rotate the bridge slightly and then line it up the best I can. And I'm going to lay it down. I'm going to do the same thing. Just going to, like 3 or 4 clicks, depending how curved you want the bridge to make it. You want to make the bridge. Line up the pieces best I can. I'm going to do the same thing. Same thing. As you can see, we're starting to see a little curve in the bridge. Now, up close, this bridge is going to look like it's shoddily connected, but from a distance, it will look really good. Again, another real tedious thing. This is especially hard to do on a controller. But again, it doesn't have to be quite perfect. Try to get the best you can. As you can see, we're getting a nice little curve to my bridge. To create like a really nice bridge sightline, creating these curved bridges can look real neat. Add my little end piece. That. Smooth out my little area here. Might use a square here, might be a little more helpful. Oh, that's not a square. That's a square. Oh, not quite. Oh, now we're underwater. Gotta find that sweet spot. Ah. Almost. This is particularly tricky right now. Just the water level is right on the edge, so that's why I'm having so much difficulty with this. It won't be this hard if you're... Yeah, it's just this is right on the edge. Anyway, you get the idea. We did it fine here. It's just this one's right on the edge, so that's why that one's so difficult. Anyway, that's we've covered a few things here. Again, a rather tedious little bit of design, but again, little things that if you spend the time on it... Oh, I'm getting more Twitch follows. If you spend more time on it, you'll get it. So, thank you guys for hanging out on this episode, and hopefully the next tutorial will be on bunkers. I will remove some of these bridges before we get going on bunkers. All right, thank you, and we'll see you next time.